I don't know how much time has passed. The last thing I remember is taking photos among the ruins of an ancient arch near the site of old Baghdad, the camera shaking in my hand from exhaustion after a long day of shooting, and then complete, heavy darkness, devoid of any sense of time. I opened my eyes to the smell of dust and soil wet with dawn dew, a scent I've never experienced like this in my life, and sounds I didn't recognize, a very distant call to prayer echoing between the walls, the neighing of horses from somewhere, and the distinct murmur of a river flowing nearby. The camera is still hanging around my neck, heavy, real. The film is still spinning inside it. And here I am, standing on a land I do not know, in the middle of a city I have never seen in my life, and every cell in my body is telling me that this place is not from my time. I stood up, still unable to believe what was happening, raised the camera with a trembling hand, and took my first photo in this new world, just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. The picture came out clear. This is real. Before taking a single step, I stopped to think about the logic of the entire situation. This is no dream. Dreams don't bring the chill of the morning against your skin, nor the scent of real soil with such vivid clarity. I tried pinching my hand. I tried recalling my last moments, the ancient arch, the camera, a strange sound, and then this. I couldn't reach any logical explanation, but I decided on one thing and one thing only. As long as I am here, I must document everything with this camera, because if I ever return one day, these photos will be the only proof that I wasn't dreaming. The first thing I noticed as I walked with slow, hesitant steps was that the city was perfectly circular. It was unlike any Arab or European city I had ever seen in my life, or even in historical photographs. A massive brick wall enclosed it from all sides in a perfect circle, with 4 grand gates opening in 4 directions, as if the city itself were a compass drawn upon the earth. I asked a man who was passing by, carrying a burlap sack over his shoulder. He looked at me with obvious bewilderment, but replied, "This is Madinat al-Salam, the city of peace, built by the Caliph Abu Ja'far al-Mansur." That was the moment I realized I wasn't in an ordinary place. I was in the very heart of Baghdad, in its earliest centuries, the era that would later be called the Golden Age of Islam. Each of the 4 gates had its own name and specific direction. One gate opened toward Ash-Sham, the Levant, one toward Khorasan in the Far East, one toward Kufa, and one toward Basra and the south. This meant that even the city's design was a political map drawn in stone. Every gate connected Baghdad to a part of the empire, and every road leading out of it ultimately reached an entire province ruled by the exact same centre. And at the absolute, perfect centre, standing alone amidst this breathtaking geometric symmetry, was the Caliph's green palace and his great mosque, surrounded by 2 additional inner walls that no one could easily breach without direct permission. I understood the concept as I walked around the inner wall. Everything in this city was built around a single, solitary point: authority. Every street, every gate, every line in the planning led back to the same centre. This was by no means a random design. This was a complete political statement built of clay, stone, and precise engineering. It was designed this way for one purpose, so that anyone who entered the city would instantly feel the sheer weight of the power they lived under. Before reaching the river, I passed by the great mosque inside the inner walls, and heard the call to prayer once again, this time from very close by. Suddenly, people stopped whatever they were doing. The merchant left his shop, simply covering it with a piece of cloth. The porter set his load down by the wall, and they all headed quietly toward the mosque's entrance. There was no chaos, no rushing, as if this rhythm was part of the city's very design, a designated moment where everything came to a halt in perfect order, 5 times a day. I stood at a distance, watching, and realized that this repetitive daily rhythm is what binds all social classes of the city together at once: the rich and the poor, the merchant and the artisan, all pausing at the exact same moment. I climbed to the top of the city's wall and saw the Tigris River. The river here was not just a beautiful view, it was the true trade route and the life-giving artery feeding the entire city. Wooden boats laden with spices, silk, precious timber and ivory moved slowly beneath floating bridges built of boats lashed together with thick ropes. Across these bridges walked people from every corner of the earth you could imagine. Merchants from Basra carrying heavy sacks, traders from India in their distinct attire, and I even overheard mentions of merchants who had arrived from China itself after a journey that spanned many months. It was here that I understood why they chose this exact location to build the capital. The river connected them directly to Basra and the Gulf, and thus to the entire world by sea, without the need to traverse treacherous deserts. Baghdad was by no means a city closed off to itself. It was a central hub for a trade network stretching from the edges of Al-Andalus in the west to the borders of China in the east. The water itself was part of the state's power, not just a source of drinking and irrigation. I stood for a few minutes watching small-scale fishermen casting their nets near the riverbank, while massive merchant ships glided behind them without anyone paying mind to the other. Two parallel lives playing out on the same river, a humble fisherman seeking his daily meal, and a merchant carrying a fortune enough to sustain an entire family for a year. I entered the central market, and the first shock was its sheer colossal scale. Endless rows of shops, each dedicated to a single craft, in a way that felt strangely organized to me. The goldsmith's row gleaming with gold and silver, the perfumer's row thick with the scents of spices and musk, the stationer's, warakin, row selling hand-copied manuscripts and books written in beautiful calligraphy, and an entire row dedicated solely to colourful fabrics imported from distant regions. In every row, people were exchanging small silver and gold coins, engraved with writing I couldn't quite read from a distance. I learned later that these were the gold dinar and the silver dirham, a unified currency accepted across the entire empire, from Baghdad to the edges of Al-Andalus in the west, and to the borders of Khorasan and beyond in the east. This meant a merchant buying goods in Baghdad could use nearly the same currency in a city months of travel away, which was by no means a given in those times. An entire economy moved within this monetary system, taxes collected from distant provinces in the form of gold, silver, and crops, land and maritime trade flowing through routes guarded by established rest stations, and a central treasury, Beit al-Mal, in the heart of the city, distributing wealth to the army, construction projects, and official stipends and charity for the poor on specific occasions. I also noticed that the trade crafts themselves were meticulously organized. Every guild had a master, sheikh, or an overseer who monitored quality and prices, and resolved disputes among merchants, akin to the craft guilds of our modern times, but without any official paperwork. Everything ran on custom and mutual trust. I left the market and walked toward a humble residential neighborhood, a bit far from the center, houses made of stone and simple folk. What strangely caught my attention was that even the poor district in this city was clean, beautiful, and well maintained by the government. The poor here enjoyed a baseline of decent living, cleanliness, and state care. All residents were provided with free education and free healthcare in times of sickness, and everyone lived in peace within the city walls. Yet, just a few streets away, everything changed completely and abruptly. Grand houses with internal courtyards open to the sky, small water fountains in the centre murmuring softly, and private palm orchards nestled inside the house walls, hidden from public eyes. This was the neighbourhood of the elite merchants and high-ranking officials, people who thrived on trade, proximity to the circles of power, or key administrative positions. The difference between the two neighbourhoods wasn't just in scale, it was etched into every small detail. In the types of food, the attire, the very quality of the fabric, and even the air they breathed amidst their private gardens. On my way to the palaces, I passed another building that caught my eye, with people entering and leaving in various conditions, some walking with great difficulty, others carrying a sick child. I inquired and was told this was a Bimaristan, a public hospital where people were treated without distinction between rich and poor. I only stepped into the outer courtyard, where I saw physicians examining patients with simple instruments and a pharmacist preparing remedies from herbs and compounds stored in small glass vials neatly arranged on wooden shelves. It was then that I realized this city was not merely a capital of governance and trade. It was also a place that sought to care for its vulnerable in an organized manner, with medical standards far more advanced than anything I could have expected from this distant era. Then I saw the army. Not an actual battle, but constant training and preparation just outside the city walls. Long ranks of soldiers, some were Khorasanian cavalry who formed the core of the state's power since its very inception, while others were elite bodyguards with weapons and uniforms completely distinct from the regular troops, far better equipped and positioned closer to the Caliph himself. I realized then that the state's might did not rely on a single city or just a central army. It was an entire, interconnected network of local militaries and governors ruling every province in the Caliph's name, wielding vast yet constrained powers tied to orders originating right here. Every distant province, from Egypt to Khorasan, from Armenia to the borders of India, had a governor who periodically dispatched taxes and resources to the centre, receiving in return commands and military support in times of need or crisis. It was a highly complex and precise administrative network, operating without electricity, internet, or any rapid means of communication, driven solely by paper letters written in clear calligraphy and specialized postal couriers who rode swift horses for days on end just to deliver a single message from a remote province to the capital, supported by an organized postal station system along the main routes. I stood watching all of this for a long time, and I understood that everything I witnessed today, the market, the neighborhoods, the palaces, the army, the Bimaristan, the House of Wisdom, were by no means isolated parts. This was a single, tightly interwoven system, a unified currency accepted everywhere to facilitate trade, an army protecting trade routes and borders, a precise administration collecting taxes from all remote provinces to manage their affairs, and scientific and healthcare institutions serving the people. Ultimately, it all led back to the exact same centre where I stood at the beginning of the day, the Green Palace at the heart of the circular city. A complete civilization, with all its contradictions, between a poor man grinding his grains by hand and a palace from which half of the known world was ruled at the time. Before returning to the wall, someone pointed me toward a grand building near the palace, telling me it was the House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikmah, a place where books from all languages, Greek, Persian, Indian, were translated, copied, and built upon. I only stepped into its outer courtyard and saw men sitting in absolute silence. Some were writing, others were comparing two versions of a single text, and there were maps and astronomical charts hanging on the walls. I understood then that the power of this empire lay not only in its army, currency, and trade, but also in gathering all the world's knowledge in one place, striving to understand and develop it. This specific place made me realize something entirely new about this civilization. It wasn't just ruling and collecting taxes, it was also building knowledge that would endure for centuries to come, passing down to other civilizations completely far from this place and this time. By late afternoon, I was standing at the city wall, capturing one last shot of the sunset over the Tigris, when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to all day long, despite all the details I had seen. The very same ancient arch I was photographing before arriving here the first time was standing right here. Except it was brand new, as if it had been built just yesterday. Its stones were clean, perfectly hand-carved, without a single trace of the aging I had seen on it before losing consciousness that day. This meant I hadn't just travelled to a different place. I was standing on the exact same spot, but in a time completely different from my own.